we're continuing our series today, Colossal, looking at the book of Colossians. It's number 51 out of the 66 books in the Bible. It's a letter from St. Paul to a group of Christians in a city in modern-day Turkey called Colossae. It's only 1,500 words long. The audio version would take you 14 minutes and 5 seconds to listen to, but we are slowing it right down, and we're taking 2 months to chew it over, to break it up, to work out what it might be saying to us today here in Cardiff. And I believe that the messages are colossal, the colossal power of God for us. And I'm going to read from chapter 1, beginning at verse 9. If you've got a Bible, you might want to follow it, but it will be on the screens as well. Chapter 1, starting at verse 9. I'm reading from the NIV. For this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all his power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. Colossal Transfer. That's my title today. Colossal Transfer. I grew up in Edinburgh and I was really into football. I was a Hearts fan until about the age of 7. I became a Hibs fan. I got a better offer, and Hibs was my team. Growing up, I managed to go to the Hampden Park to watch Hibs win the Skull Cup final, 1991, I think it was. We were there. I remember age 11 when they launched Radio 5 Live, and it was wall-to-wall football commentary. I was so into it. I listened to it all. I remember listening live to Eric Cantona's Kung Fu Kick at Crystal Palace. Does anyone remember that? And then the transfer news. Now, back then, there was no transfer window, so transfers could happen at any point in the year. And I remember when Alan Shearer was transferred from Blackburn Rovers to Newcastle United for £15 million, smashing the previous record of £8.5 million. Some of you are thinking, well, I can remember Trevor Francis, the first £1 million signing. Some of you are thinking, well, I can proudly remember when Gareth Bale went to Real Madrid, the first €100 million transfer in 2013. Well, obviously, it's a Brazilian who holds the current record for the biggest transfer fee. Neymar went to Paris Saint-Germain from Barcelona for €222 million a few years ago. PSG spent nearly that much on Kylian Mbappe as well, didn't they? And they still can't get their hands on the Champions League. But God gave it all to transfer us from the dominion of darkness to the kingdom of the Son he loves, the kingdom of light, where we have redemption, forgiveness of sins. That is a colossal transfer. And I want us to grasp how great it is. We're going to look at 3 aspects of this transfer. First, you might be thinking, I'm no Mbappe, I'm no Neymar. I'm not worth 222 million. What's my worth? What's our value? That's the first thing we're going to look at. Second, what's so bad with Barcelona? What's so bad about our former club? Where have we come from? And third, I want us to think about what's so great about Paris Saint-Germain. What characterizes our new club? What characterizes our new kingdom? But before all that, I do want to recap briefly Paul's powerful prayer from verse 9 to the beginning of verse 12. He prays that God would fill them with his Spirit so they can be wise and know how to act, how to live, and how to be empowered to do that. You know, we always pray, "Come, Holy Spirit," at the end of our services here at Citizen. And that is at the heart of our prayer, that God would fill each one of us so much so that we can go out from here to live a life that's pleasing to him, strengthened with all of his power, the same power that raised Jesus from the dead. It's his glorious might. That's what glorious means. It's death-defeating power. Bearing fruit, growing, as we remain in him, connected to Jesus, like we looked at a few weeks ago, the true vine. Receiving his wisdom. New York pastor Tim Keller used to say, wisdom is knowing what to do with the 80% of life decisions where the moral laws don't apply. Some decisions are easy. Should I cheat on my tax return? Should I cheat on my wife? Those are easy decisions. Of course not. The Bible is clear. But loads of decisions are hard. We need the Spirit. We need him to open our blind eyes. We need him to unblock our deaf ears. We need to see his purposes. We need to hear good sense. We need him to melt our cold hearts so we can truly love. I love Paul's heart here. He's never met them. He's never met the church in Colossae, but he says he never stops praying for them. I have about 800 names on my prayer app. Everyone who has signed up on our database, just so I can pray for everyone. I'll be honest, I don't know everyone on the list. I had the Hannahs the other day. Now, I know maybe half of the Hannahs, but there's a lot of Hannahs on the list that I don't know yet, or maybe I can't put a face to a name. But I pray for you all, and I'm inspired by Paul's prayers for them. So what is our value? What's our worth? Maybe one or two of you are thinking back to that five-a-side football you were playing the other night, thinking, well, I may not be Neymar, but you want me on your team. Some of you may be looking back at your last selfie that you posted, thinking, I've got it. Some of you may be checking your stocks and shares app, thinking, just doing a little mental calculation, working out your net worth. Yeah, it's not looking too shabby. Verse 12 says, the Father has qualified you. He counts you worthy. He says you are enough. Because I bet that, like me, most of us, if we open our bank app, or if we look in the mirror, or if we try and kick a ball around, or whatever it might be, we can think of many people who are more capable, who are more competent, who are more qualified than us. The Father has qualified us. Literally, it means he has made us sufficient or competent. He has enabled the unable. Now, I reckon that the word that he uses here is meant to remind us of Moses. Do you remember the story? Moses is looking after his father-in-law's sheep, and God grabs his attention with a burning bush. He's on the run from Egypt. He's a fugitive. He's committed murder. And he's found refuge in a foreign land, not among the people that were his by birth, the people of Israel, nor among the people that were his by adoption, the people of Egypt, but the people he'd married into, the Midianites. He had all sorts of identity issues, guilt issues, shame issues. And he's tending his father-in-law's flock and spots a burning bush. And he steps closer. God says, take off your sandals. This is holy ground. And he does. And God says, I've got a mission for you. I want you to go back to Egypt. and get my people Israel out of there. Well, Moses has a few questions for God. Why me? God says, I'll go with you. Who even are you? Moses asks at one point. God says, I am who I am. Moses has a few more questions. What if they don't believe me? God says, take that staff in your hand, throw it on the floor, and it turns into a snake. Then God says, pick up the snake, and it turns back into a staff. And Moses says, I'm really sorry, God, but I just can't. I'm not good enough. I'm not up to it. I'm not qualified. I'm not sufficient. And God says, I made you. I'm calling you. You've got this. I will help you. And then Moses says, I'm really sorry. Could you just please send someone else? And that's when God gets angry with him finally. Now, I'm not saying that God will get angry with you, but if you're sitting here today thinking, like Moses, I'm not qualified, I want you to listen to what God says to you. God says, yes, you are. I have qualified you. I am saying, you've got this. You have what it takes for what I'm calling you into. I wouldn't call you otherwise. I am who I am. There was a great story at the leadership conference. I was at the Royal Albert Hall. There were over 5,000 people from all around the world, and the guy in front of me, it turned out he'd come over from Denmark with his pastor. I said, how did you become a Christian? He said, it was actually in prison. 4 years ago, I did Alpha in a prison in Denmark, and here he is at the Albert Hall learning how to be a leader, and so he can get ready to go back into the prisons. I love that. But there was a great story from a guy who was a lawyer in Western Australia, in the city of Perth. And one day, he sensed God saying to him, I want you to go and pray for the sick in the hospital. And he thought, well, it makes sense to pray for the sick in hospital because there are sick people in hospital, but where do I even start? So he sat on it for 3 months and didn't do anything about it. And it sort of lingered with him, and he felt uncomfortable that he hadn't done anything about it. So one day, in his lunch hour, he got on a bus to go to the nearest hospital. It was an 8-minute journey, and the minute he got onto the bus, he heard, as it were, further instructions, because there hadn't been any further instructions before then. And he sensed God saying, ask for the chaplain. And he didn't know what a chaplain was. So when he got to the hospital, he went up to the reception and said, I'd like to see the chaplain. And the receptionist said, which one? He said, what are my options? He said, we have Roman Catholic, Church of England, and Lutheran. He said he was quite a fan of David Beckham at the time, so he said Church of England. That was the only reason he said that. She said, do you have an appointment? No. Does he know you? No. Are you visiting someone who's sick? No. And the reception said, I'll see if he'll talk to you. 10 minutes later, the Anglican vicar appeared, and they recognized each other straight away. Turned out that years earlier, some of his extended family had gone to the vicar's parish in Perth, in Western Australia. And this vicar had been filling in as Anglican chaplain for the last 3 months, and this was his last day. And they talked and talked, and despite being a lawyer and having no relevant qualifications, the chaplain knew him, and within 2 weeks, they'd sorted it out so that he could be honorary chaplain, to go in during his lunch hour, once or twice a week, and pray for the sick in the hospital. And God began to release new gifts and new compassion in this man, and he now leads a church of 50,000 people with 36 locations, and his name is Mark Varghese, and I'd never heard of him, but I liked him. I thought he was quite funny and humble, and God can do extraordinary things when we say yes, when we obey, because God is extraordinary, not because we are. He raised Jesus from the dead. And no matter what your bank balance, or no matter what you see when you look in the mirror, or no matter how bad your football skills are, like mine, God is the one who qualifies us, who makes us competent, who equips us. Next, where have we come from? There's nothing wrong with being a lawyer. There's nothing wrong with FC Barcelona. But there is everything wrong with life without God. Verse 13. He has rescued us from the dominion of darkness. Now, when Jesus was arrested, I didn't realize this until yesterday. When Jesus is arrested in Luke's Gospel, chapter 22, he uses exactly the same phrase. He says, now is the dominion of darkness. It's nighttime. They turn up to arrest him with swords and with clubs, and he's betrayed with a fake kiss. And they take him off to be crucified. He's tried in this phony trial. They torture him and inflict violence on him. They lie about him and they mock him. And the sky turns black on the cross. Later in Colossians, Paul describes being alienated from God, enemies in our minds, doing evil deeds. In chapter 3, he goes on and he lists sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed. And then he gives another list. He lists anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language. And lastly, he says, do not lie to each other. And there are some common threads here. What's this? What's the old that we've been called out of? Where have we been transferred from? It's like darkness includes the selfish desires that we indulge in secret. And then there's violence and aggression, hatred, enmity. And there's also deception and dishonesty. Kind of three subheadings. God has been so patient with me. I look back in my own life. God has been so patient. I couldn't have coped if God had downloaded to me everything all at once, and if he'd highlighted all the darkness in me at once. But he's shone his light in one area after another, bit by bit, over, and he continues to do it. I really don't want to go into any more detail, but I feel like I should share one story with you. So I was helping lead a church back in Brazil, and I have this group of friends here in the UK, and we meet together to pray together for a weekend every year. We've been going for about 20 years now. I'm that old. We book it in a year in advance, and 7 or 8 years ago, one of my friends was diagnosed with terminal cancer. A close friend. I'm godfather to his daughter, and I wanted to book holiday so that I could come back for this weekend of prayer with my friends and to have a bit of family holiday as well. And the church wardens said, that's not a very convenient time for you to go on holiday. Church wardens they're not the vicar's boss, but they kind of, Paul's laughing. Paul is a very friendly and very wonderful church warden. Church wardens back then said, not a very convenient time for you to go on holiday. And I decided not to travel. I was fuming. Now, I did make it back to see my friend before he died, a few months later, but I couldn't let go of this anger, this resentment. It was eating me up. And that anger that I was carrying used to come out. It came out to other people who didn't deserve it at all. But I thought, this is righteous anger. And maybe you're thinking, yeah, it was righteous anger. But it was destroying me. And for nearly 3 years, I would get angry with anyone. I'd get migraines. I'd get into arguments. My wife says that I used to grind my teeth at night during that period of time. Very stressed. Now, those church wardens finished, and a new church warden started. And she could see that I was still so angry. And one day she gave me a book, and it was called The Bait of Satan by John Bevere. Now, I was like, I'm all right, thanks. Left it on the bookshelf. I ignored it for a long time. And then I finally thought, I'm going to look this guy up on YouTube. Can't be bothered to read the book, but I'm going to give him 20 minutes. I'm going to watch a summary. And I watched this little clip. And I just fell on my knees. And I realized I'd been holding on to resentment. I'd taken offense all those years ago, and I was trapped. No, I wasn't physically violent. I wasn't being sexually immoral. I wasn't living a lie. But I was full of anger and bitterness. And it was poisoning me. And I needed to forgive. So I did. Jesus taught us to pray, forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And I forgave those church wardens and anyone else who had offended me. And I've hardly had a migraine since then. You know, if I do have one, or if I find myself getting angry, I know what I probably need to do. Now this, I know, may raise a few questions for you. Firstly, are migraines always caused because of a lack of forgiveness? No. My dad gets them with red wine. In moderation, even in moderation, it's always in moderation. Secondly, is taking offense the only way that Satan can get into our lives? No. But I do think it's quite a major way, which is why the Lord's Prayer goes straight from forgiving others to temptation, which is what Satan does, and then on to delivering or rescuing us. The same word as we got in Colossians, he rescued us from dominion of darkness, from the evil one. It says in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15, be careful that no one is deprived of the grace of God, and that no root of bitterness should begin to grow and make trouble. It says that can poison a large number. Bitterness, poison. I think the word toxic is overused today, I'll be honest. I think it's overused. People talk about toxic cultures all over the place. But what's really toxic is holding on to resentment, refusing to forgive. And if we've received God's grace, God's forgiveness, we've got to share it with others. We've got to. Thirdly, how do I forgive when it's so hard? Anyone ever wondered that? How can I forgive? I find it so hard to forgive. That's a big question. Jesus says, when you pray this prayer, go into your room, lock the door, and pray to your Father who's in secret. And he'll hear you. He says, you need privacy because this stuff is deep. You need privacy because these things also need to be named out loud. These aren't just thoughts going around in your head. These are words with power. When we say them, something happens, something is broken, something is released. Saying out loud, I forgive that person. I'll be surprised if you can't think of at least someone at the moment. You don't need to say it out loud, though. Do that when you get home. Could get messy otherwise. But when we say it out loud, something happens. It's like saying, I do at a wedding. Those words have power. A linguist would call it a performative speech act. I love the grammar of it here. Forgive me. I know I love the Greek grammar, and I won't go on to it too long. But I remember being taught that Greek this wasn't on the script. But now I've started. I've got to kind of finish. I'll make it as quick as I can. So in Greek, they don't have verbal tenses. They have verbal aspects. Why am I trying to explain all this? Anyway, it's quite helpful. It should be quite helpful. So in Greek, there's no past, present, and future particularly, but there's how are you describing the action. And to explain this to me, my linguistics lecturer said that if someone was saying, I name this ship, you know, like when a ship is being launched and they throw the bottle against the side of it, they would actually use what we would usually think of as a past tense, because the moment you said it, it's happened. And here it's the same in the Lord's Prayer. When we say, I forgive them, it's like that bottle smashing against the side of the ship. That moment that word is said, that ship has been named. The moment that you've said out loud, I forgive that person, something's actually happened. So if you're saying, I don't know how to forgive someone, just try saying it. Try saying it out loud. If I haven't explained the Greek grammar, it doesn't matter. I'm not a Greek teacher anymore. But the other thing Jesus tells us is this is a daily prayer. And sometimes it might take a few days, and you might need to repeat that prayer a few times. Some of you are like, yeah, I've been doing that prayer. I've been trying to forgive that person for a long time. Keep going. Just keep saying it. And the poison will depart. I believe that. But it's, give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we also forgive those who sin against us. As we also forgave, literally, those who sin against us. So that's where we've come from. That's the old dominion of darkness. Where have we come to? I'm coming into land soon. But what characterizes our new club? Forgive, I'm going to give up on the football analogy soon. But Paris Saint-Germain, they're owned by the government of Qatar, basically, which is why they can spend more than 400 million on 2 players. One of the richest countries in the world per capita. There's no one richer than God. It all comes from him. It all belongs to him. He made it all, everything. And he has entrusted everything to Jesus. It says that. The Son he loves. Jesus is the heir. He's inherited everything. And with him, we receive a share in the inheritance. We are co-heirs with Christ as God's people, made holy in Jesus, brought into his light. We've been transferred into this new kingdom. And there's no transfer window. We can be transferred at any time. It's all his grace, and all he wants is our gratitude. And the only qualification is our invitation. Only say yes. You are enough because he is enough. So what does it look like to be a community of the kingdom of light? I love that song that Tom pulled out of the old repertoire, Light of the World. And I remember when Tim Hughes, who wrote that song, his dad came on our church weekend away when I was a student, and it was a new hit. It was the new hit, you know. It was the new. I don't know how long ago it came out, that song, but it was a new song, and it was, you know, it was popular. It was gaining a bit of traction, and you know, and I just remember looking at the dad of the guy who'd written the song, and he was a vicar, and he was sitting there on the front row, and I just saw him sort of melted with a mixture of pride in his son and gratitude and worship for God, and the way he raised his hand. And as we offer back to God our gift, he, as a father, takes so much delight in our little offering that we give to God. He takes so much pride in it. There's a children's story that I love to read with my boys called You Are Special. And it's by Max Lucado. I don't know if you were brought up with it. And it's a village, and it's full of these wooden characters, the Wemmicks, and they go around giving each other a black mark if they're slow, or if they're ugly, or if they're fat, or they go around, and some people gathered a lot of these black marks, and then they would give stars to the people who were fast or good looking or whatever, and they would gather all these stars, and one day one of the wooden puppet figures sees another puppet figure, and she's got no stars and no black marks on her. And he says, well, what happened? And she explains that she went up the hill to the house, and she pointed him the way. And so the Punchinello, the main character, he goes up there with all his black marks, feeling pretty bad about himself. And there he meets the woodmaker, the crafter of all these little puppet figures. And he begins to speak over Punchinello. He begins to speak as God speaks to us. He begins to speak about how he made him, how he crafted him to be exactly as he wanted him to be. And one by one, the black marks start falling off and onto the floor. And he says, you can come here anytime you want. You know, we can come anytime we want back to the Father. And then we can begin to create a community which is different, which isn't about putting stars on certain people and black marks on other people. We can begin to become that community where we're forgiving of one another, where we put up with one another, and more than that, where we love and accept, but also where we are honest enough to address, not to hide or to forget the areas where someone might have upset us, or where we ourselves are aware that we've done something maybe wrong, and we can be honest before God about ourselves. That's, I think, a little bit of what it looks like to be in the kingdom of light.